Hey guys, what's up? DC here from Hauntingly Yours, a podcast for the paranormal. I can talk. This is my very first live stream, by the way. Totally excited. Never thought I'd be doing this. I always thought I'd be a behind the scenes kind of guy. The man behind the curtain. Don't pay attention to him. Well, here I am. I've been busy, hard at work the past few weeks, tracking down stories, tracking down locations, and talking to people, crossing my I's, dotting my T's, and all that fun stuff. And now I'm sitting here and I'm about to read a collection of personal ghost stories that I have been snatching up over the course of the past few weeks. So bear with me here as I am reading these live for the very first time. If you like what you're hearing, leave me some love, with a like, a comment, hearts, whatever. It's greatly appreciated. So, personal ghost stories. Starting off, we have a story from Cami from the podcast Mystery. If you haven't heard of it, check it out, by the way. I highly recommend. Definitely one of my favorites. When I was a little girl, the entire street I lived on was supposedly haunted. Our house was originally a cottage for the Court Inn, a very nice vacation spot for visitors to the area. The inn was built in 1830 as a house called Lausanne, but it was converted to a hotel in 1889. The hauntings most people reported were of the Grey Lady, otherwise known as Agnes of Glasgow. She died of a broken heart and is said to roam the streets looking for her lost love. We had weird happenings all the time in that house, but the most frightening one was when I was about 5 years old. I was finished with dinner, so I asked to be excused to my parents' room to get ready for bed. When I got to the room, I turned around and my father was behind me. I watched him go over to his dresser and open the top shelf. The dresser was very tall, so I couldn't see what he was doing. He pulled out a large Bowie knife and placed it under his pillow. He didn't say a word. He just smiled an overly huge, creepy smile and put one finger up to his mouth as the universal sign for, "Don't say a word." I heard his voice coming from the kitchen, so I stepped into the hall to see him still sitting down, eating and laughing with my mother and sister. When I turned back around to go back into his room, he was gone. He couldn't have made it from his room to the kitchen without walking past me. I was terrified and confused, so I went back into the dining room, frantically sobbing. I told my parents what I saw. They thought I was just being a kid and scared to be alone. So my dad walked right into the room with my mom and myself behind him. He opened the dresser and his knife was missing. He then pulled up his pillow and the knife was under it. No one could explain what happened because the dresser was too tall for me to reach by myself. Wow. um, that's quite a story, Cami. Thank you for sharing that. That's wow. Doppelganger, anyone? I mean, thoughts? That's totally creepy. Totally creepy stuff. Whew. Let's see what I have next. Let's see here. So our next story actually comes from Terry. In the mid-90s, 1990s, that is, not 1890s, I moved into an apartment in a building in the Old Town section of Portsmouth, Virginia. It was a grand old building that had originally been a very posh hotel, but during the American Civil War, it had been used as a hospital. My apartment was on the third floor, and the floor plan was a little different from most places. The front of the apartment, overlooking North Street, contained a large living room. From there, a very long hallway connected to the dining room and kitchen in the back of the apartment, where a door led out onto the roof and then to a wooden stairway. The bedroom, its connecting walk-in closet that was large enough to be another bedroom, and the connecting bathroom lay along this corridor, which was laid with wooden floorboards. I was in the bedroom unpacking, and my boyfriend of the time was in the living room unpacking books when I heard something down this long corridor. My first thought was that he was rolling the vacuum cleaner down the hallway. It is only natural for your brain to try to pin something commonplace onto a strange occurrence. I walked out to the living room to find the boyfriend staring down the hallway and looking quite startled. When I asked him what he had been doing, he said that he had heard something rolling down the hall towards him and looked up expecting to see me, but no one was there. He left very soon after this and never returned to the apartment again. Well, no great loss since he apparently couldn't sing "I Ain't Afraid No Ghost." From that point on, I would often hear a man's voice. I would hear footsteps, even walking down the hall outside my bedroom at night. And this is not something a woman living on her own really wants to hear. My cat, Snapper, would sometimes look down the hall and, with fur standing on end, hiss at something only he could see. I wasn't terribly bothered by this because there was never a sense of malice, but then my invisible roommate began a new trick. I would get up in the morning to find that the door leading from the kitchen to the rooftop had been unlocked. This was a deadbolt lock that my father had installed when I moved to Portsmouth, as he was a little unsure about my safety there. It had a thumb latch, and I was always very careful to make sure it was locked when I went to bed at night. Actually, it was always locked unless I had some reason to go out onto the roof. A friend of mine who had more experience with the paranormal than I did at the time suggested that I explain to the supposed ghost that I didn't like having my door unlocked. So one day, I wandered through my apartment and had this one sided conversation. Hi. I don't know if you're haunting me or someone else at the moment, but just in case you can hear me, I just want you to know that I don't mind sharing my home with you, but I really don't like having my door unlocked at night. Since this was a Confederate hospital, I'm going to guess that you are a gentleman and really don't mean to make me feel unsafe. So could you please not unlock my door anymore? I never again found my door unlocked, so he must have been listening. A week or so later, though, I happened to run into my upstairs neighbor, Sarah, who said, "The strangest thing has happened. Twice this week, I've gotten up in the morning and my back door has been unlocked." Hmm, said I. How odd. I can't imagine how that could be. That was a great story. That was a great story. I would honestly probably react very similarly in that type of situation. I would talk to the spirit totally 100% and just kind of tell him or her, what's what. Just, hey, look, you're here, I'm here. I can totally be respectful of your existence, but I need us to kind of, be on the same level. Don't unlock this door. Makes me unsafe. Capiche? Eh. All right. So, our next, actually, I should say stories because I've got three. I've got three stories here from a friend of mine named Sarah that I used to work with. What feels like ages ago. When I worked at Bartlett's Cafe in Matthews Courthouse, I was working late one night. It might have been around 10 p.m., and I was cleaning the bathroom as one of the last things to do that night. I was in there alone when I heard what could only be the sound of large furniture being dragged across the floor right above me. Not only was it super loud, but it shook the ceiling and walls. I could see the tiles shaking. I remember thinking someone was lifting up the tile because one was about to fall out of the ceiling. I was too paralyzed in fear at that moment to move. It lasted less than a minute and stopped. I immediately ran out and asked if anyone was upstairs, but the one server and cook who were on and right there in front of me, they were just they were baffled. I immediately thought, well, someone is definitely up there. That couldn't have been because that just couldn't have happened on its own. So the cook went upstairs to check everything out, but no one was up there and nothing had been moved. I was too shaken to go look myself. For a second, I was convinced someone was playing a trick on me, but nothing added up, so I clocked out and got the hell out of there. After that day, everything else seemed to make more sense. Every time I went upstairs to get supplies from storage, I always heard footsteps coming up behind me. The floor creaked as you walked, so it was obvious when someone walked in the hallway. I would hear it and expect a coworker to pop in any minute, but no one ever did. Prior to the incident, I was convinced it was the old building floor just settling. But then there was always that feeling like someone was watching you. Anyways, I never went up there alone again, or when it was dark. Ooh, yeah, I used to work at Bartlett's Cafe. So I'm very, very familiar with the layout of how that place used to be. So I can kind of relate to Sarah's experience a little bit, like the odd creaks and moans the building would make late at night when, nobody else is around. It can easily play tricks on the mind, but you never know what else could be easily there lurking in the shadows. Let's see what else she has for us. I worked part-time as a cleaning lady around 2007 and ended up cleaning the Bank of America. I liked it because it was next door to a guy I was dating at the time, so it was convenient to go clean the bank, then go right over to see him. I would usually go and clean around 10 p.m., but sometimes later. I had a key, so it was a flexible job, anywhere from when the bank closed to when it opened. As an introvert, I liked not having to deal with any people, so the later the better for me. This bank creeped me out from the beginning. Sometimes I would pass by rooms where I swore the light was just off, but now it was on. That feeling like someone was watching you was always there. Then the phone calls came. In every single room I walked into, I'd enter one office and the phone would ring, then leave to go to the next and that office phone would ring. I would be out in the main area and the desk nearby would ring. I just quickly cleaned and got out. Most of the time I had headphones in and just tried to ignore things, and that feeling, everything seemed okay until one night I was there on a particularly late time. I was just finishing up, and the last thing I do is take out the trash. I usually carry it out the back door, down the hallway with the bathrooms because it is closest to the dumpster. As I was walking in the hallways by the bathrooms, I heard something I could not ignore because it was quite loud. It sounded like water running. A lot of water running, like a shower. However, there was no shower in these bathrooms, but maybe 3 sinks. And even if they were all running full power, I don't know if it would have sounded like that. Then I heard a man talking, what sounded like on a phone because no one was answering back. I immediately thought it was just an ATM worker that sometimes comes in after they close to work. So I walked to the front to see if there was a work van, but there was no cars in the lot but mine. I immediately freaked out, thinking, what if it's being robbed? I was so scared I shut the door to the hallway and set the alarm and ran out. I thought about calling the cops, but I figured if someone was in there, that alarm will be set off quick and the cops will come. I left and went next door to watch. I never took my eyes off that bank. No one came. No one left. Nothing moved. I was terrified. I thought about quitting, but instead I hung on for a bit longer and only came when the bank was closed. But the manager was still there around 5:30 or 6 p.m. Thinking back, I think they were good ghosts that meant me no harm. In fact, I believe they saved me by making sure the side door was unlocked the one time I got locked in between the two glass entrance doors and left my keys inside. All the doors I escaped through that night were always locked, except this one time. Wow. I imagine that had to have been pretty intense. I don't know what, honestly, I don't know what I would have done in that situation. I probably would have hightailed it out of there and then been like, wait, why am I running? And the curious side, the investigative side of me would have gone back in and started looking for answers. Let's see. One last story from Sarah. One night I was leaving my boyfriend's house. It was around 1 a.m. This is another old house in Matthews County who he shared with 3 roommates. The owner and one of his roommates always told us stories of how this house was haunted. I was young and did not believe much of his stories because they were kind of wild, like seeing an old woman at the bottom of the steps and a face in the window of the room where this man killed himself. Also, lights turning out and voices being heard on the baby monitor he had for his elderly grandfather who is being cared for there. After this night, however, I never questioned him again. I was about to leave and we were in my car talking. It was dark and the only stars were out that night. So it wasn't hard to notice this bright light shining toward us. This was a house on the water. So my first thought was, is that a lighthouse light shining across the water? It scanned over us and scanned the yard. When it wasn't over us anymore, we looked up and saw it look more like a flashlight coming from the roof. It turned off, and that was when we saw a dark figure of a man walk across the roof and disappear. I immediately asked my boyfriend if he saw that, and he said yes. If it wasn't for him, this would have been another questionable moment of my sanity. But this visual and the fact that he could not have jumped off that roof without being injured, and if he did, we never saw him head to the woods in front of us. And there's nothing but water on the other side, really. That sealed the deal. We realized he just disappeared. We were afraid to move. I was convinced still it was someone that was breaking in or could do us harm, so I told him to run back to the house quick and I'll wait with my lights on. Then I drove off and called him when I got home. He said he was almost convinced it was his roommates being silly and hanging out on the roof, but everyone was in bed and not dressed for outside. They also said they all heard footsteps on the roof. Wow. That is pretty crazy. I mean, dark figure moving around on the roof. Yeah, that's absolutely insane. I've seen my fair share of shadow people, so I'm going to leave that one alone. Oh, well, I was hoping to see a few more people here. Hi, Laura. Hey, Donnie. I'm not sure if you're still on. Alex, hey. Eric Freeman Sims from the Unseen Paranormal podcast. Hey, bro. What's up? Hope everybody's doing well. All right. Let's see. I've got a couple more. What do I have next? Okay, so this one is an anonymous submission, but it's still pretty good all the same. I grew up in Clyde, Ohio. My mother and father had a motel on Route 20. It was right in the hub of tourism, 20 miles from Cedar Point Amusement Park, 50 miles from Cleveland. So our summers were hopping. We had a friend by the name of Dale who had a motel in the next town over. When we would fill up, we would send him our business and he would do the same. He had a mentally handicapped son by the name of Jay. He was severely autistic. But this was the late 60s, and not much was done with autistic kids back then. Anyway, we were friends, and our families did a lot of things together. When Jay was 19, an accident or possible suicide happened. The only ones that were there were Dale and Jay, and a gun. Dale ended up being shot in the head. The gun and Dale were on the floor. It was ruled an accident. Jay hadn't said much since the tragedy, or hasn't said much since the tragedy. But I swear to you, what happened next is incredibly true. We had a phone in the office and a line that ran down to the laundry in case we were doing laundry and couldn't make it all the way to the office. My mom was washing sheets and I was in the office. The phone rang and I picked it up. Now, this was about 6 to 8 months since Dale had died. I didn't know it, but my mom had picked up the phone at the same time. "Hey, kid, what's up?" A familiar voice came over the line. "Where's your folks?" he asked. "Mom's in the laundry and Daddy's fishing. Who's this?" But the voice on the other end just kept talking about the time we went to a picnic and it was so cold that we ended up eating in the car. All the time my mind was racing. It couldn't be, but here it was. It was unbelievable. The voice coming out of the phone was from a man that it had been dead for more than 6 months. Finally, I interrupted and, "Dale," I said. "Yes," came the reply. "Where are you?" I asked. Suddenly, the phone went dead. No dial tone, nothing. I stumbled out the door, headed for the laundry room to tell my mother of my encounter when I saw her coming toward me. Her face was as white as the sheets she had just been washing. I then realized that she had heard the conversation. "Who was that?" She looked at me as if I could tell her something other than the truth. You heard it. There's no doubt in my mind who it was." As she took my hand, I didn't know whose hands were trembling more, mine or hers. I hope Dale just wanted us to know that he was all right. And he remembered all the good times we had, because we never heard from him again. I don't know. Maybe that's one more place you only get one phone call. Hmm. Yeah, I'd say that sounds about right. But I this isn't the first ghost story that I've heard like this. This is actually a pretty common phenomenon because I've talked to several people who have had very, very similar experiences from loved ones and friends who have passed on. Now, me personally, I've never experienced this. The closest thing that I've ever gotten to is having a loved one visit me in a dream and speak to me that way. Now, a phone call, huh? Well, I don't, I'd answer. Let's just leave it at that. All right. So, hey, Sarah. Glad to see you joined us. Let's see. I've got another story here if my phone will cooperate with me. Bear with me. This next one I'm going to pull up is from Joe, and Joe sent me a fabulous story. I mean, I love this. It's got everything a good ghost story should have. I mean, no doubt about it at all whatsoever. Forgive me while I get a swig of water. Let's see. In March of 2003, radio personality Bob Anderson, the Duke of Portland, suffered a massive heart attack on air at Oldies 100.9 and died. The mic was still live, and a coworker who observed the off-air light from her studio went to check in on Bob and found him on the floor, deceased. She yelled out, "Oh my God, Bob!" before the mic was cut off. Several days after Bob's passing and funeral, all of us at the radio station mounted a plaque on the wall of the oldie studio and renamed it in Bob's honor. A couple of weeks later, while doing my 7 p.m. to midnight shift, I walked down the hall to one of the automated AM stations to check a possible issue with the feed. While I was scrolling across the screen, I saw someone in the reflection behind me and wrongly assumed it was the overnight guy, who I told to hang on a second as I scrolled all the way down. When I turned around, he was gone, so I walked around the building calling out his name, even checking the bathroom. I walked outside and saw my car was the only one in the parking lot. So I continued walking the building, certain I felt and saw someone behind me. I eventually walked into Bob's old studio, and immediately I had goosebumps on my neck and arms. I looked at the plaque and realized in that instant it was Bob Anderson I had seen. I walked back to my studio and tried to make sense of what happened. 30 minutes later, Brian, the overnight guy, walked in and instantly observed I looked like I had seen a ghost. I couldn't think of any words. He started crying and asked if I'd seen Bob. Shocked by this question, I asked him why he asked that, and he revealed all week long that he had been hearing voices he believed were Bob. I stood up, collected my belongings, and left at once for night. My boss called me into work that morning and accused me of playing a joke on Brian. I assured him that was not the case and that while I didn't believe in ghosts, I saw one with my own eyes. You know when someone is standing behind you? Yeah, I saw a person directly behind me in the reflection of the screen. Brian quit that morning. I returned to work later that evening, and a woman named Jamie came in to take over at midnight. Before I left, I showed her Brian's nightly responsibilities and told her I would be up for several hours if she had any issues. She did not. The next evening, when Jamie came in and I was leaving, I asked her how the first night went. She told me she had no problems at all. As I walked out, she yelled, "I do have one question. Around 3:15 a.m., a man walked past my studio window and the door was open. He never walked past the door, so I eventually got up to see who it was, but he was gone. Do you know who that would have been?" My eyes filled with tears and I choked out the words, "That was Bob Anderson. He's dead." Jamie asked me what I was talking about, so I took her by the hand and walked her over to the studio across from the one she occupied the night before. It was the studio of Oldies 100.9. I pointed to the picture on the plaque and asked her if that was the person. She confirmed it was Bob. She called her husband, who stayed with her all evening. She intended to quit in the morning. My boss called me in again, accusing me of playing pranks. I pleaded with him that I was not behind it and certainly didn't have a way to explain what was happening. Over the course of the next few days, several more radio employees claimed to see or hear Bob, including a man named Gary who joined Oldies despite the fact he had poor vision. Gary could only see peripherally and with very large type. When he read something on air, he had to turn his eyes to the right in order to read a script. The first Friday he was there, I stopped by to welcome Gary, who was a Boston legend and a fellow Yankee fan. Gary expressed how much he was enjoying his retirement in Maine, but looking forward to getting back on the air for a bit. He liked the radio station and the equipment, but questioned the small market radio etiquette he'd observed so far. I asked him what he meant, and he told me several times someone had violated the long-held radio policy that no one enters a studio while the on-air light is on. I was overcome with chills when I escorted Gary over to the wall and helped him position himself to see the plaque, Without prompting, Gary exclaimed, "Yeah, that's the guy. Who is he?" I told him it was Bob Anderson. As all this was going on, I received an acceptance offer to move home to Connecticut to host a morning show. I kept in touch with my coworkers who several months later informed me the odd occurrences had completely stopped. And there was much debate about whether or not it was some prank I had orchestrated, or if there was a gas leak in the building, or whether there was some validity to these multiple experiences. Bob was finally out to rest. My former boss pulled Bob's contract from his file. The Duke of Portland was just months away from a retirement he had very much looked forward to. The activity ended at the same time his contract expired. He was finally free. Wow. Wow. I mean, I've read this story a couple of times now, and man, I mean, it's such a good, it's such a great story. I mean, I can't emphasize that enough. You know, it's spooky, but it's sentimental. I mean, what more could you possibly ask for? Fantastic. Joe, I'm not sure if you're listening, but beautiful stuff, man. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I much appreciate it. And I hope everyone who listens enjoys it just as much. Now, I am going to wrap this up with a couple of my own stories, and then I'm going to sign off. Keep it at that. So, I've been paranormal investigating, let's see, since I was 19 years old. Gosh, that feels like it was forever ago. In the podcast, I talk about my very first experience with the paranormal, which took place. Actually, well, let me backtrack. If you want to be technical, my first experience with the paranormal was when my grandfather passed away when I was 13 years old. Actually, 12 years old. He died 2 days before my 13th birthday. Now, I remember it was about 2 days after we had buried him. I was devastated by this. I mean, he and I were incredibly close. I woke up in a white room, incredibly bright lights. Everything was white, and the room seemed to just go on for miles. I mean, miles. And I'm walking around, you know, lost and deer in headlights pretty much. And I hear a familiar voice yelling out to me, "Denny, Denny." And, you know, it's coming from way off in the distance. And I finally realize it's my grandfather, but he's clear on the other side of this room. So I make my way over to him, and he's sitting in this white throne, or on this white throne, and he's wearing a white suit, and he looks great, better than he has in a long time. And I start talking to him, "Papa, what's going on? Where am I? You're gone." He says, "Even though I'm gone, I wanted you to know how much I love you. I never got a chance to say goodbye. Take care of yourself and have a good life." I woke up from that dream knowing it, at 13 years old, it was something more. It wasn't just a dream. I was bawling my eyes out, and I'm looking around going, did this just happen? I went around and I told anybody who was willing to listen. I told my mom, my stepdad, the reverend at our church, and they basically all told me I was insane. That yes, my grandfather and I were close, but I was a young boy, and that was just my way of grieving, my way of dealing with it. Well, my grandmother and I got to talking not too long after this took place, and I told her about this dream, and she said, "You know what? You were the last thing that your grandfather talked about before he had a heart attack." And I said, "What? Really?" And she said, "Yeah. He hadn't been doing too well. I went back to his room, asked him if I could get him anything, and he said, "Yeah, how about some soup?" And I started to leave, and then he asked, "Have had you talked to Denny? Have you talked to Denny today at all?" And then it wasn't too long after that he died. So I take that and I take my dream and I say there's no doubt about it. My grandfather reached out to me to tell me goodbye. I don't care what anybody tells me. And the crazy thing is, over the years, I've had similar scenarios where somebody has died and they've made their way back to leave me a message. Now, there's a gnat, he can go away. Well, I I recall back in 2011, I was renting a room from a guy. Found myself in a really messed up situation. This guy was like a notorious drug dealer, and I got out of there. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Well, long story short, he ended up killing himself. He overdosed on some medication, and the cops called me to go find the body because they could not go in the house legally without a search warrant. And they were like, "Well, you used to live here, you know the guy." Maybe. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure." So I go to the guy's house, I knock on the door, I look in, and he's hunched over on the couch, like so, lifeless. Now, it was common knowledge, he's a drunk. I mean, he would fall asleep on the couch all the time. I opened the door of the house. It was unlocked. And I walked in, I called his name, and I looked over, and I could tell by the side of his face he was purple. And I went over and I touched him, and sure enough, he was dead. I called the cops, and they came in. I gave a statement and everything, told them exactly what I had found. But it was about a week later, I woke up in a dream. I was in this guy's house. I actually woke on the living room floor, got up going, "Why am I here?" And I knew that I was consciously aware it wasn't a dream. And I'm looking all around the place, trying to figure out how I got here. Next thing I know, here comes the guy down the staircase, coming right toward me, brushing his teeth. And he looks at me. He says, "Hey, Denny." And I said, "Hey, man, what's going on?" He said, "Well, when did you get here?" I said, "Apparently just now." He said, "Well, hey, you know what? I'm glad you're here. I need to tell you something." And he walked all the way up to me, still brushing his teeth. And he looked me right in the face and he said, "Now that I'm gone, can you get in touch with my sister and ask her to look out for my estate? I don't want it falling into the wrong hands." I mean, he was an older guy. I understood. And I said, "Yeah, sure." What else could I say? He said, "Thanks, man. I knew I could depend on you." Patted me on the back. And then he started walking toward the front door. Now, as he got near the front door opened up and this blinding white light came in. He walked into the light and the door shut. And that was the end of that. I woke up going, "Why me? What? I mean, am I just this in tune to the universe?" Um, First it was my grandfather, then, it's the roommate. And then flash forward to, let's see, 2018, I found out that a friend of mine and a former roommate had passed away. They suspected suicide. And it floored me. It absolutely floored me. I remember the very next night after I found out, I awoke in a dream. And again, similar scenario going, where the hell am I? This, I knew it was something else. And I'm looking around this place. It's outdoors, like in this warehouse type setting. And I'm thinking, okay, is this hell? Because it's dark, it's dreary, and there are hundreds of people all dressed the same. They're all dressed in these like dark gray jumpsuits. And I'm thinking, this is okay. This is not my scene. I need to figure out why I'm here and book it. Anyway, I'm moving through all these people, and I end up seeing my friend and my former roommate walk by me. I recognized his long blonde hair, his glasses, and I yelled his name out. He stopped. He looked at me, and he was confused. He said, "Denny, what are you doing here?" I said, "I was just asking myself the same question." He said, "Well, you don't belong here. Get out while you have a chance." And I looked in his hands. He was carrying this lunch tray. He walked over to a table where a bunch of other people were eating. He sat down and he started to eat. Meanwhile, there are other people. They're coming and going, coming and going. Everybody's like working and doing different tasks and projects. And I'm looking all around. I look up in the sky, and the sky, is very ominous looking. There, it's storm clouds are moving in. It looks like a heavy rain is coming, and I'm thinking, I need to go. And then I woke up. Crazy, right? I have no explanation for it. I mean, you can say I have an active imagination because, yeah, I'll admit I do very much so. But I have been told that I could be a dream walker or a sleeping clairvoyant, because those are just three of the many stories, by the way. Three of the many. And I mean, I am in tune to the universe. I know 100% without a doubt in my mind, because that is why spirits like talking to me so much. That is why they are able to reach out to me when I'm on paranormal investigations. Everywhere I go, they're drawn to me and want to talk, or give me some message, or ask for help. I mean, it's just that simple. I'm going to share one more story with you, and then I think I'm going to go. Let's see. What story have I not told on this podcast? Because I have told so many. Sarah, I'm just seeing your comment. I wish I had dreams like that. I mean, you never know. I mean, first time for everything, right? Those dreams, I mean, they just leave me going, WTF. I mean, every single time. And I've had numerous conversations with, different clergy over the years, from, the Catholic Church and, the Baptist Church and so on and so forth. And everybody just, they're blown away by it. And one gentleman told me, he said, "You are God's conduit to show his followers that there is an afterlife." And I'm like, I don't necessarily want to be God's conduit, but I appreciate the sentiment. Yeah, it is what it is. Anywho. Oh, story. I'm going to tell my Swamp Man story, because I've actually been telling that one quite a bit here recently. And honestly, it's by far one of the most spooky things that has literally ever happened to me. And I have seen some scary stuff in my time, let me tell you. So I remember it was probably about 2008, and my little brother told me that the playground behind his elementary school, Lee Jackson, was haunted. And I said, "Get out of here. An elementary school is not haunted." No way. But he was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. I was playing on the playground. I was the only one. And I heard a little boy off in the woods, yelling." And I said, "Okay, you know what? I'll check it out. Why not?" So I took this girl that I was interested in at the time. Let's leave it at that. Her and I went and we walked the woods behind the elementary school. And the woods is a good distance away. And we ended up walking up onto this hill to get in the woods. And once you got in there, there was this Revolutionary War, wrong war. There was a World War II cemetery, and I remember down at the bottom of the hill there it was a swamp right along the outside of the woods. But here we are up here walking through the cemetery in the woods, and we're looking all around, and I mean it's pitch black and there's really not a whole lot of sounds being made, and her and I are just like, okay, there's nothing here. Well, here we are, we're turning about to leave when all of a sudden, doo-doo, 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 right past me runs a golden blur. That is literally the best way I can describe it. I turn, she turns, and we look, and it turns out to be a deer, a male deer. He's lit up. He's glowing this beautiful golden color, and he's just doo 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 doo, and then he disappears. And her and I look at one another, and we're like, "What the hell was that?" I mean, we saw it plain as day. He just came out of nowhere and disappeared. I mean, he ran out of that cemetery, ran out of the woods in a hurry. Well, here we are scratching our heads when all of a sudden we hear this. I mean, it sounded like a heavy steel door opening in, like some old horror movie. And we're looking around thinking, what the heck is that? And then all of a sudden, this guy appears at the edge of the woods and he's levitating in midair. It seemed like he was on this imaginary elevator. That's the only way I can think of putting it. And he's standing there. He's got this long black coat on and he's got a really tall black top hat on. He's hunched over and he's carrying a lantern that has a golden ember in it. I mean, you couldn't see anything about him other than that. He was a shadow man for the most part. Well, the girl I was with, she's like, no way, I don't want any part of this. She started backing up away from me, and I said, no, no, no. I'm finding out what or who this is. I start walking toward the guy. He steps out of the air and into the woods, and he starts walking along the wood line, and he's just scanning back and forth with this lantern. And he and I are essentially just walking side by side all along the way. And I'm going, hey man, who are you? Where'd you come from? What are you doing down in the swamp? I'm trying to get his attention, and I'm not trying to provoke him, but I guess I aggravated him enough because he turned and he looked at me and I went, oh shit. And then he didn't do anything. He simply just turned back and walked in the same direction he had come from, coming back to the exact spot that he had stepped into the woods. And I stood there watching as he stepped off the wood line and he was levitating in midair once more. And then he started lowering back down and into the swamp. I looked over my shoulder at the girl I was with. I said, stay here. I took off running out of the woods, out of the cemetery, down the hill. She decided to join me. Who could blame her? I got down there because I couldn't let this guy get away. I'm just sitting there going, who is this guy? I mean, where did he come from? And I hear that door, that opening back up. I get around there in like 60 seconds. I look all through the swamp and the dude is gone. No door, no elevator, no swamp man in sight. Gone. Just like that. I still can't explain it to this day. I mean, if anybody can ever offer me some solid explanation, give it to me. I mean, because I honestly wonder if he's like a protector of the cemetery or something. I mean, there's something there that he's looking over. That is the impression that he gave me, because I encountered him on another occasion. I told probably 100 people that story, and everybody's like, "Oh, take me, take me. I want to see the swamp man." And I'm like, "Why do you want to see this?" Anywho, I was just that guy, I guess, that guy that saw these things, and of course, people wanted to come along with me. But I had this other girl that I ended up taking to hopefully catch a glimpse of the swamp man. We went walking around in the woods. It was at night. There was nothing there. And we didn't see a golden deer. We actually gave up. We were starting to leave. We were coming out of the woods, walking down the hill, around the corner, just about to pass the swamp when all of a sudden we heard the heavy steel door type sound opening up, and then the tall grass in the swamp started moving. There was no wind blowing. I mean, there was nothing that could have been making this happening. But then all of a sudden, we saw this lantern light coming through the swamp at us at an extremely fast pace. And I went, crap, it's him. And soon enough, you saw the tall black top hat, the black cloak, and that lantern with the single golden ember glowing inside of it. And he was running out of the swamp toward us. And I said, screw this, let's go. Her and I both took off running. I'm not going to lie about that. We took off running. We got back to the parking lot. We stood there just going, swamp man, what the hell? I mean, that's twice I've encountered him. And I've told this story so many times over the years. I honestly think at some point I should go back and see if he's still there, and try to lure him back out and get to the bottom of who exactly he is and what he's doing there. Also, at the same time, I'm curious if any elementary school kids have seen the swamp man. Can you imagine that? Like, little Billy goes home to mom, "Mommy, I saw a man come out of the swamp." Ah, oh gosh, I would be that dad to be like, "Really? Tell me more." But I am a ghost storyteller and a ghost tour guide and a paranormal investigator. Woohoo! Anywho, guys, I could easily sit here and go on all night, but I've told you quite a few stories. I hope you enjoy them. I'll try something different here really quick, and then I'm going to officially call it quits. I'm going to turn on the spirit box here. This is it's a research communications device. It is an FM AM sweep radio. I'm going to hit the sweep button and just see if anybody's around. You're just going to hear a bunch of static, probably hear some radio stations bleeding through, but if the spirits are here, which I usually do have several that are lingering around the property, they could very well try to communicate. So I'll turn this on, get it situated, and respond to Sarah's comment. Those woods always creep me out. Yeah, right? Oh, I mean, totally. Plus, I didn't even think to share this. There are a couple of houses that back there in those woods that have long since fallen down, and I know one of them was actually set on fire in the 1970s. There was a white woman living there, and she fell in love with a black man, which was not cool at the time, obviously. The black guy was a notorious drug dealer. He ended up in prison, and his lady friend, she basically snitched to the police and landed him, in prison. And he ended up finding out, and he sent two of his guys on the outside to kill her, essentially. They came into the house. They drugged her so she wouldn't wake up. They set the house on fire and made it look like an accident. Yeah, fun stuff, right? I wonder if she's lingering around. You never know. All right, so Spirit Box, I'm gonna run this for a couple minutes and we'll see if anybody's here. You're gonna hear a lot of static. Just bear with me. Try that again. There we go. So it sounds like we have some radio traffic coming through right now. Hi, this is Denny. Is there anyone there that would like to communicate with me? And if anybody hears anything that I'm not hearing, feel free to comment it in the appropriate section. No. How's everyone doing tonight? It's getting colder outside. Cold? I heard that. It is cold. Can you do me a favor and say my name to let me know that you're here? Just say Denny for me, please. I would appreciate it. Radio traffic. Oh, that was a voice. Hello to you. My name is Denny. What's yours? I've got a device here. If you come around, the device will pick you up. It'll give you energy and allow you to talk with me. You're welcome. Is there a message that you would like to share? All right, well, it seems like some of you are willing to talk, some of you aren't. I understand. You could be tired. So I'm going to let you go, okay? Thank you for attempting to talk with me. I want you to rest now and enjoy the rest of your night. Thank you. All right. We'll talk again soon. Bye. Interesting. So it sounded like a little bit of chatter was coming through, but nothing really significant. Yeah, sometimes that's just how it is. Some nights they're super active, and then some nights, you don't get anything at all. That's just the name of the game. But anyway, my friends, that is all I have for you tonight for this first ever live stream for Hauntingly Yours, a podcast for the paranormal. Those of you who have tuned in and those who are still tuned in, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate each and every one of you. Stay tuned for more because season 2 is going to be a lot of fun. I've been talking to a lot of different paranormal investigators and historians and authors, and all these people are actually going to be coming onto the show, and I'm going to be talking to these people and hopefully letting you hear some of the stories directly from the people who have experienced them or who have investigated these sites, just like I have. So yeah, should be good stuff, right? Anywho, I am DC O'Rourke. Some of you just know me as Denny. That's cool too. Until next time, I am and will remain, much like the spirits, hauntingly yours. Bye, guys.